Today we kōrero with the curious and passionate Professor Grant Schofield, who is a Professor of Public Health and the Director of the Human Potential Centre at Auckland University of Technology. He is also the Chief Science Officer at PreKure. We kōrero about his 4-digit mathematical formula that he has to make the most out of every 24 hours he has, some critical stats around mental health, and some really helpful mindset tools. We also kōrero about free-range kids, languishing, positive psychology, and acceptance commitment therapy. Let's get into it. Thank you so much for having us today here, Grant. I'm so excited to talk to you, and I think there's going to be so much to take away for people who are listening to this for their well-being, but also parenting and mindset, and there's just going to be so many cool things. So thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So we always start with a well-being card. So we always talk about trying to have conversations that are a little bit more deeper and not just how are you good and carry on with our day. So if you pick a card, go for the top.
Okay, what have we got there?
If you could choose one book as a mandatory read for all high school students, what would that book be and why?
Ooh, okay, so there's a book now, I think on its 30th edition, published in the 1950s by a guy called Dale Carnegie, and it's called How to Win Friends and Influence People, which I think the title's a little bit misleading, but
it is.
The summary of that is that people, the way to get on with people in life is to ask people about themselves, not tell them about you. It's like the basis of all psychological counselling, but it's also just so handy. And we, especially, I don't know if it's a male thing in particular, that we just want to jump to telling them about us, and then when they've got a problem that they're talking about, we want to tell them how to sort it. And actually, like, that would be the thing in schools. Imagine a world where that was the default.
Teach those really quality conversations and how to ask good questions, and actually care about the person's answer.
Yeah.
I love that. So tell us about you. Tell us about where you grew up and how you got into psychology.
Well, I was always quite good at school, but didn't really know how to try properly. And then I got sidetracked by sports, and I only just qualified to even get into university in the day. And so didn't have that much choice. And my dad was an engineer. He's like, well, you should do engineering. I was like, well, okay, I'll do engineering. It lasted for a week. And I was like, well, I need to do something interesting. Like I don't want to do this stuff. I want to do something interesting. I was like, psychology, that'll be interesting. I had no idea what psychology was. Actually, I still quite like biology, and I've always liked biology, so I also did physiology. So I did a degree in those two things. And then a master's, and then a PhD. And I think mainly because I was young, and I don't think anyone would have given me a job to do anything, frankly. And so I just sort of stayed at uni and did that stuff. And then I was really interested in psychology. My first job was in a psychology department, but also you have to be a registered psychologist, which turns out to be a calling that doesn't really, I'm interested in it, but the actual practice of it, I'm actually quite useless at. And actually, it's sort of on that how to win friends and influence. So I know the theory, but my curiosity and wanting to get to a solution is just too much for that. So I'd sit in these counselling or psychological sessions and go, but you should try this. I was just reading about this on the and have you heard about blah 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 blah. And of course that's completely stupid. It's not how you do it. But actually, it turns out to be an academic and a researcher and have a bit of that practice, but focus on the big problem. Is like, I'm curious, and so this job is like the best possible job in the world. And actually, there's a lot of talk about universities and academics and this and that, and it's become this and that. It's like the best job invented in the history of humanity, and for you to complain about it, you're in the wrong job. Gosh. It's
pretty awesome to be able to go to work, and curiosity is the right characteristic to have, every single day. Because often when we're at work and we ask questions, it's almost that you get in trouble. We just get on with it and do the thing. So it's really awesome to be able to be curious and use that as a as a strength every day in the work that you do.
Yeah. And then what's also happened is, as my life has gone along its course, I've always been curious about things. It's like, well, I don't know, like 20 years ago, how come my kids are the only ones who walk to school and everyone else is driving them? And, what's the story with that? So, and how come kids don't free range around the neighbourhood and take risks and, grow up on their own terms anymore? So, that was a thing then. And as they've moved through teenagehood into early adulthood, it's like, oh my gosh, look at this whole mental health thing unfolding with this young age group. What's the cause of that? And now we've got cell phones. What's the story there? And then so that's how I've been thinking.
And we're going to talk about every single one of those, because I love your term about free range children. I was a free range kid. It's so good. But you are really curious, and so because of that, you try a lot of new things and you give things a nudge and sort of just try and figure them out for yourself. So. Talk to us about some of those, but also talk to us about that 4-digit. I love the sort of mathematical equation that you have for your days of how you break up your sleep and work. So tell us about that and how it helps you.
Oh, well, so the prelude to that is like about trying things on yourself. So in my opinion, any good science, unless if it involves humans, then I think it's imperative you try it on yourself. Yeah. And in my case, I'll try and con the family into it and the kids to do it or whatever is appropriate. Yeah, in an ethical sort of way. But I've had some epic failures in my time of fasts and keto diets when I first started in that category and those sorts of things. But it's important that you learn about these. So that's the thing. The algorithm and the time use. I just get frustrated for myself to start with, going, I haven't got enough time to do these things, and then I'll be talking to other people, or it's about being active or healthy or eating better, and everyone's like, I'm just so busy, I haven't got enough time. And I was like, well, how's that even a thing? There's like quite a few hours, and we would study time use in people and go, man, like people are spending several hours a day doing screens, and just to put that in context, the latest data from America on teenagers' screen use for entertainment is that the average time spent by a teenage girl in the US on screens for entertainment is 8 hours a day, and for boys it's 9 hours a day. I mean, this is an astonishing thing, yet they haven't got enough time to exercise or cook properly, or their sleep's disturbed and they're so busy. My God. So I've been thinking about this little algorithm that I've been using for the last year or so quite well, actually. I'm not always perfect, which is, I call it 8, 7, 6, 3. 8 plus 7 plus 6 plus 3 is 24, the number of hours in a day. And what does that mean? Well, 8 hours sleep, I think that's pretty, need to set aside the opportunity for that, and I generally get that. I'm pretty good at that. 7 hours focused work. I don't know how people do any more than 7 hours work. I don't know, maybe it's possible, but that, at least in my business, that's where it maxes out. 6 hours, I've called these things starting with C: chilling, commuting, children, chores, cooking, cleaning. I don't know, but just stuff. And there's some work involved in that. Still, there's 3 hours left for my health stuff. And that'll include some fitness and some learning stuff. We've got a sauna and an ice bath, and I'll do some of those sometimes, and might do some reading about health that I'm interested in. Listen to a podcast. I'm just interested in that type of thing. So that's my algorithm about how I purposely set out my day. I don't know if people will resonate with that, and they'll go, oh yeah, you can do this and you're lucky about that. Sure. But where would you like to spend the hours in your day? And what else is interesting about that? You'd ask people and they'd go, oh, well, the sort of less mature answer there is a sort of hedonistic one. I'd be doing this pleasurable thing and this thing. Actually, that's not where well-being involved. It's always meaningful work. So,
and we do have to be realistic about what, it'd be great, I'm sure, if you could do and that's why holidays are great. So for a week or whatever, when you take it off, you can just lie on a beach if that's where you choose to go. But it is about what does our everyday look like, and how do we make ourselves thrive, help ourselves to thrive during those days each day.
And meaningful work. Doing chores and things at home are also meaningful. Getting the proper rest is meaningful, but actually spending some time on your own health, good luck without that.
long term, eh?
Well, even short term.
Yeah, it's actually very true.
Yeah.
So with all of your experience, but also your research, talk to us about sleep, and because it's what we need, but most of us don't value it enough, and we do either sit on our phones or do jobs or enjoy it when our kids have gone to bed and we stay up later and we don't get that sort of 7 to 8 hours sleep. So talk to us about why it's so critical, what you've seen in your time.
Well, so there's a couple of big things going on there, right? So if you get to bed, well, even a step back from that. So, what does a good night's sleep feel like? Well, you wake up feeling refreshed and energized. And when you ask people in populations about that, about half of New Zealanders say they wake up not feeling refreshed. Which is quite an interesting thing, because if you were to ask the same question, and it was asked back in the early 20th century, fewer than 3% of people said they woke up not feeling refreshed. Wow. So something fundamentally has changed. Yeah. And fewer than 3% said they got less than 6 hours sleep. Now that's about a third of us. Yeah. So, there's been, quite a big change in humanity. And so you go, well, we've changed the amount and quality. So that's probably something to be interested in. And a lot of this, I think, is to do with the light environment. So you think, provided you've got somewhere comfortable to actually sleep, think camping, where you've completely normalised your awakened sleepiness with light. It gets dark, it goes through twilight, you go to sleep, and then it gets light, you wake up. Yeah. And, our modern life doesn't look like that. And so under those conditions, getting to sleep when it's dark, then early in the sleep cycle, you have got this deep sleep, which is restorative for reasons around inflammation in the brain. This lymphatic system, which pumps 3 times more during that time, is basically anti-inflammatory chemicals for the brain. And if you go to bed late, you just miss that cycle, so that doesn't happen. And then as you go through them closer to the 6, 7, 8, there's more quantity of dreaming there, which I think is pretty crucial for the rewiring of the brain, the neuroplasticity, moving the postal notes that have been accumulated into the right places. Yeah. And if you get up, you don't get that 7 or 8 hours, and you miss out on that part. So, these are just crucial parts of our biology. But I think, my work and others, you go and do shift work, and we've done those studies. You end up pretty much sucking on everything that you can measure in medicine and psychology compared to people who don't do shift work. Wow. It's I know we want to keep the country going, but gosh, if you had to choose between shift work and not shift work, it's the best you can describe your behaviour under shift work is damage control. And I think, being awake during the day is a crucial thing, and being asleep during the night is an important thing. The other thing is the sort of light mismatch that we talked about. The camping is very matched, so that blue light that's high during the day suppresses melatonin, the sleepy hormone, and then as you get into twilight and there's more red wavelength light, that comes up and you start to feel sleepy. Of course, white LED lights in your home and white LED screens, think phones, tablets, have a really high proportion of blue light, and that potentially affects us, especially kids. So device use affects quality and quantity of sleep. That's a known thing. And then there's a whole field, and I'm no quantum physicist, so this is actually getting slightly out of my area, but it fascinates me, right, that this infrared wavelength light, so this sort of, that's the sun on your back type thing, that's what that feels like. It's also in the edges of the day. It permeates, this is an incredible thing to me, is that you've got something that is light, zero mass, zero charge. It permeates your body and gets into the cells, gets into the mitochondria where you produce energy, and gets into the electron transport chain where you produce the actual energy and moves electrons. And that's true across all wavelengths, but this infrared in particular can permeate fully into the body, right into the centre of the brain, and acts there. In fact, there's recent trials putting on infrared light caps with Alzheimer's patients and seeing quite substantial improvements in brain function. Wow. Same in visual function, it permeates into the retina and the cells there. And, it's such an interesting thing, this light thing, in our sleep. So yeah,
massive thing that we all need to we need to focus on and learn more about the thing and value. Put the value.
Yeah, there's a value in light.
Yeah.
And I think if there's, we know the value of being active, and I think we'll talk about this later about ranging around outside when you're a kid.
Yeah.
And getting off that 9 hours screen time. The US kids and New Zealand kids probably close. You're not getting light in its normal sense. You're getting artificial light in the evenings, and you're getting no natural light during the day. And no wonder.
This is triggering my mother's senses of, sorry, my kids, we're going to do some changes. We don't do devices at our house anyway, but how can I get them outside more in the sun? That's
well, your device thing is a really admirable thing, and the fact you've managed to maintain that this long puts you into pretty much an extreme outlier in society. I don't even know how you've done that. I mean, I know this stuff, and it's still a battle for me with my kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that because we've held on to, we've never done it, so we've never had to make the change to say we're taking it away. I think it's good. And then, I don't know how we've done it. But I'm proud that we have, and I'm going to hold on as long as I can that it doesn't come in.
Yeah,
we get so many compliments from their teachers and everything that they're engaged in class and they can look at people in the eye and have a conversation that's a full conversation, ask good questions.
When you hear that data about the teenage boy in the US, an average of 9 hours entertainment screen time a day, what does that even make you think?
It just makes me so sad. Well, I think I talked to you about it. So when my first son, my newborn was, I think he was about 6 months old, we went into a car park building. We were going into a shopping centre, and I was with my dad. So Papa, me and my son Harry, and I put him into his little pushchair, and then a woman was getting out beside me with her baby. She put hers in, and it was possibly smaller than my son, and she put an iPad in the pushchair with the baby.
Well, to entertain him while he was...
entertain the baby, who was
shopping.
Less than a year, it was only all of 6 months old.
Wow.
And I was so sad at that point, and I feel like that potentially was one of those turning points for me, because for my son, he's looking up and he's seeing people smile or...
Yeah, engaging in the world.
Yeah, he's just seeing what's going on and hearing people talk and paying attention, and possibly that was one of those moments. And it was no judgment to her. Maybe there was a colicky baby and they were having a real tough time. I'm not sure, and maybe she didn't do some jobs, but it just was one of those sort of polarizing moments that I don't forget. And I just want my kids to see everything and understand as many people as they can and be empathetic.
And what do you reckon is going to happen when they come through to teenage years?
Possibly totally rebel and go get every device they possibly can. I don't know. I hope that we've had enough cool conversations with them about why it's so great that they're so neat and we get these cool things and they're doing cool things in the world and enjoy nature. Yeah. I don't know.
But you've got... Because on the other hand, you've got this device by even 40 years ago, lens is more or less magic. It's got all of humanity's knowledge right there, and you can contact your friends and family right there. That's an astonishingly awesome tool.
Yeah.
On the other hand, it's ridiculously double-edged sword that cuts deeply and nastily and changes their whole well-being.
Yeah, I think, and it's also, I was talking to Sammy about this, who's sitting behind the camera, and I just did the naughty thing of talking about someone behind the camera, but being aware of myself now. So sometimes if they're all busy, I sit there on my phone scrolling, and I've actually got to stop role modelling that as well. And then it's not naughty. It's not. Of course, I'm going to talk to my friends and send messages, but choosing those moments of when's appropript to do that and when's not.
Yeah, like at the dinner table. Imagine being the family at the dinner table where everyone's on their phones.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a thing, but maybe it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a big chat, but we'll see. But we need to introduce it in a way that it's not bad, but it's also a measured thing that we're aware of how we use it. I think is hopefully how we'll get around it with our kids. Now you're a volunteer surf lifesaver, and you also work with the children within that, and you do some of the most interesting things like a night swim. So talk to me about this night swim and what you do with surf lifesaving.
Well, I've loved surf lifesaving. I was involved with it quite a lot when I was younger, and then I went away for a while, and I've come back as an adult as my kids were going through a program. This is at Tairua, which is a beach in the Coromandel. It's a pretty dangerous beach. It's got big waves. The thing about surf lifesaving I like is it's actually really, it's sort of like what the Scouts or Girl Guides used to be in many ways, but sort of cooler, because it's about developing young people and their leadership and skill and whatnot. But one of the things I really like, which fits with my philosophy, is it has actual risk involved. And so I sort of feel like risk and adventure are critical in adolescence development. And so one of the things that I'm most proud of with our program in Tairua, probably now that it goes on this podcast, Surf Lifesaving New Zealand will find out about it, it'll get stopped. But the thing that we build up for, we generally have this 3-week summer program. We get a couple hundred kids coming along, and they start when they're 6 and they finish when they're 14, and they can go on and train to be a lifeguard. But the sort of penultimate activity for the older kids at the end of that 3 weeks is we do this thing called the night swim. And so we'll end up you're having, I don't know, probably 30 kids with their instructors, and we wait till 9 o'clock, it gets dark at the club there, and then we've got 4 or 5 boats out past the surf zone, and we're sort of pretty organised for safety. We've got our IRBs, we've got our radios, we've got the tubes. The kids stay in small groups and are sent off one group at a time, and we account for them when they get onto the boat. But you still got to get out through the surf in the dark. Get aboard the boats, and then it's the radio chat is pretty cool. It's Delta boat, cleared to proceed, and then we also take off together round the back of Tairua. There's a thing called Mount Paku. It's a big old volcano that makes up a prominent part of that area between Pauanui and Tairua, and we pull up and anchor off about 200 metres off that part of Paku, and this is exposed ocean at night time. With 14-year-olds, and we proceed into the water, and we proceed over to where there's a cave, and you can get into the cave by going underwater and popping up, which is full of glowworms.
Oh wow!
And then we all assemble in there, and then we reverse that activity and make their way back. And it's what I like about it. I think the perceived risk is higher than the actual risk. Which I think is a good thing for kids. They've got their own stories about the sharks, and there are sharks there. Actually, quite a lot of them, but I don't think they're really coming to get anyone. But that's another whole thing. And I just love that about surf lifesaving, and then even things that you regard as relatively safe, like just surfing in a big wave, is a high risk activity. You need to know what you're doing, and I love the idea of exposing kids to real risk and adventure managed. We're not stupid about this. We don't want anyone actually hurt, but the risk of that, I think, is crucial. And
those are stories they'll tell forever. That's so cool. Now, with the work that you do, you have a focus at the moment on languishing and on positive psychology. So talk to us about, because languishing became the buzzword in 2020, right? But Adam Grant overturned it. It's always been there, but it kind of came front facing to most people. So why is that your focus?
Well, I suppose I've been interested in being the best you can be. If you're going to be alive, you might as well be having a good life. And I think that varies depending on the age group and what that means. This isn't about, getting rich or, lazing around on the beach. This is about having the necessary skills and equipment, your own physiology and your own brain to navigate your way through the inevitable ups and downs of life. So in my opinion, a life well lived has many hard bits. In fact, that's essential for a good life. But how do you negotiate those? Where you're going to need to be a robust human. But if you're not a robust specimen, then you're probably going to go through some of those downs and stay down. And that's what I think about languishing is not being able to come back from what life gives you. And I mean, I think just to show you how much that's changed, I mean, this is an astonishing thing to me. I think it's really important that this is discussed, and it's not discussed in society. We talk about mental health, and we talk about young men's mental health in particular. I think that's an important thing because there's a high suicide rate. They do kill themselves, and that's bad. But for a young woman, we're not talking about this at all. And by every count, except for that, our young women are doing twice as badly as our young men. Twice as much depression, twice as much major depression, twice as much turning up at hospitals with self-harm, twice as many attempts at those types of activities. And something has changed in being in that state for our young men and women since, well, the last 20 years really. We started measuring this. I'll give you a good example. Our National Health Survey measures psychological distress. So it's not mental illness, it's just not doing well at that point in time. And in 2005, in the New Zealand Health Survey, the 16 to 24 age group, it was about 5% of that age group was not doing well. And that, young woman twice as bad as young men. And that sort of trickled along like that until, like in most Western countries, until about 2011, 2012. And then for some reason it's inflected upwards and it's just rocketed up. So that in 2021, it was about 24% of that age group had what we call severe psychological distress at that moment in time. 1 in 4 girls twice as high as boys. And it seems to still be continuing. And there's a few questions there, right? What happened at that time in 2011, 2012? And then the question is, why are girls higher than boys? And then what are we going to do about this? And why and how do we actually advocate and get resources to whatever we're going to do something about? Because, like this whole idea of we need extra counsellors and psychologists is all very interesting and potentially helpful if you're in that state. But it's sort of a stupid solution. I'll give you a good example, right? So we're talking about Tairua, where we lived in that Mount Paku, and you mentioned the Tairua school, where one of my sons did go. They decide they're going to run around Mount Paku. It's a bit rocky, and because it's Tairua, they're all in bare feet. And a few kids come back, and then actually they notice that half the kids have got cut feet.
Yeah.
You're not going to go, right, the solution to the cut feet problem with the Tairua schools running is we need more doctors and nurses in Tairua to fix the cut feet. I mean, that's just ludicrous. You're going to go and pick up the glass, or don't run on the place where there's oysters. Get around in bare feet, toughen your feet up, or maybe put some shoes on. Last case, but that's a thing. And when you're talking about extra counsellors and psychologists for this rapidly big change in mental health, it's not the cause. If you want to fix it, you go to the cause, and you go, what's the cause? And I think there's a few things going on that are so interesting there, right? And so we're talking about mobile devices, and I guess we'll talk about social media now as well, that the smartphone and social media in that 2012 period started to come through. That's a thing. I think our diet and junk food hasn't gotten any better, and I think more recently things like gaming and vaping are issues. But I don't think they converge on the same thing, and it's this. And this is an interesting thing about how they affect how your brain works and how you feel, and how robust you can be. Well, first of all, those things can often displace just getting outside and being active, and all of the benefit, because there's stress about that, and you learn things there on your own terms. But we'll talk about that in a moment. The other bit is that all of these activities, highly ultra-processed food, vaping, gaming, and unknown to most people, social media, bang up a neurotransmitter called dopamine, and you feel good. And you feel good at a level that isn't normal for humans in history. And unfortunately, the outcome from that feeling good is that, really good, is that your brain down-regulates its dopamine reception. And now, and people know about this from smoking, nicotine goes up, you feel good, but your brain down-regulates. Now, all smoking's doing is moving out of low dopamine, pain, back to being normal, where you weren't smoking, right? And this is exactly what social media use does. This is exactly what vaping does. This is exactly what gaming does. This is exactly what ultra-processed food does. It promises pleasure, it gives pleasure, and then the brain down-regulates on that pleasure. So now you've got pain, and you need to consume more and more of this stuff, and it just gets you back to not feeling pain. And then the great shame about that, you've now got a condition called ahedonia, that normal little things, petting the dog, going for a walk, doing some exercise, don't raise dopamine enough to make you feel good, so you don't do them. And anyone who's got a teenage boy, particularly that's been a gamer, will know the destructive cycle of this, right? The gaming, their emotions get more out of control, they get less good at being robust. They don't want to exercise, they don't want to eat healthy food anymore because it gives them nothing back. And we've had this with our son, our youngest son, frankly. I'm embarrassed to say that, but then we went cold turkey. We got rid of the gaming console. He went completely ballistic, and a completely different, beautiful human being emerged from that. Wow. That was now robust and wasn't languishing. Yeah. In many ways, when you think about all of these things going on for our modern young people, you go, man, it's surprising they're not even worse. Yeah. But we're the adults in society, and there's consequences for some of the things we create, and we need to notice those. Yeah.
So what it worries me, it worries me so much, and that's why I'm so excited to share this information with anybody who's listening, because I think the more we can also be paying attention to those changes in our kids. Yeah. Because often, like, we talk about like those little by little changes and bit by bit and month by month and week by week and all these things, but pay attention, because we're not paying attention either. We're on our phones too. And we're
we're sucked into scrolling.
Yeah, like pay attention. Know what's. Yeah, it really worries me. So there's a thing called cognitive behavior therapy as well. So talk to us about that, and how can we help ourselves but also our kids to make those better choices?
Yeah, well, CBT's been an interesting thing in psychology. I'm sort of a fan of it, but I've taken another aspect of that called acceptance commitment I'm more of a fan of. But cognitive behavior therapy is like, some of these things that you're going to know that you're going to do are going to result in things happening. You jump on your phone to do one thing, all of a sudden, half an hour later, you're still death scrolling through Instagram. The CBT solution to that is like to notice that it's actually opening the phone in the first place that's doing that. I've used CBT exactly on myself for this just in the last couple of weeks. I was doing the same thing. Yeah. Phone was in the bedroom. Wake up, doom scrolling. Didn't even know I was doing it. Louise, my wife's like, what the hell are you doing? You defend yourself because it's like, nothing wrong with me. I'm a good human being. Yeah. I noticed that, had it pointed out. The CBT solution is just to get the phone the hell out of the bedroom in the first place. Yeah. So it never even starts. Yeah. So that's one school of thought in psychological therapy, I think, and it's effective for some things. And some people go, look, every time I drive past the KFC, just seeing that and the smell of it, I'm like, and then all of a sudden I find myself at the KFC, so I'm just going to drive a different way home. So that's one way of doing things, and it is effective. I think there's other ways as well. So, yeah. So
then talk to us about what is acceptance commitment therapy and how can we implement that into our lives? Yeah,
so cognitive behavior therapy, you can see the use in that phone example, right? Because it's so obvious. Just get the phone the hell out of there. Wouldn't be done with it. But actually, I don't think it works all the time. And where it doesn't work is that humans, just the way we're wired, we're prone to negative thoughts and feelings. Like, these are entirely normal things, and they're normal because in the past they've saved our life. Like, oh geez, that looks a bit scary, I'm going to stay away from that. Yeah. And you do. We worry about things because there was consequences for not worrying. Yeah. Which were often life-threatening. So we're hardwired with what we call this negativity bias. And I would say negative thoughts and feelings aren't just possible, they're inevitable, they're going to happen to everyone. That's a normal thing. And so the CBT approach in that context, I think, is ineffective. You're trying to get rid of negative thoughts and feelings, and in many ways that's the problem with therapy. There's been books written on this. Jonathan Haidt's The Coddling of the American Mind, and his latest one, The Anxious Generation, really make this point that you can go down the sort of safetyism aspect, or don't expose them to anything that's going to upset them, and we're trying to avoid negative thoughts and feelings when there's a futility in that. Whereas acceptance commitment therapy would go, well, there's really two bits to it: acceptance and, surprisingly enough, commitment.
Yeah.
And so what does that mean in practice? Acceptance is like, I'm going to have negative thoughts and feelings, that's normal. I'm not trying to delete them. It's not possible to delete negative thoughts and feelings. And the problem with trying to avoid, or when you have negative thoughts and feelings, get rid of them, is you end up often with the exact opposite. So you're going, I don't want to be thinking this, blah, blah, blah. And so you end up with a situation called fusion. It's like, I imagine it wrestling a tug of war with a monster on the other side of a pit. The more you wrestle, the more energy you give it, the more front of mind. Don't think of a white bear.
Yeah.
Don't think of it. Don't think of it. Well, you magnify it.
Yeah.
That's fusion. Whereas the acceptance part really helps with a process called diffusion. And you go, well, yeah, okay. It's interesting that I'm feeling like that. It was probably to be expected, since I'm just about to go up and give a keynote address, and of course I'm nervous. It'd be weird if I wasn't nervous going to do this, or I'm about to start this big football match. Yeah, of course I'm worried. That's a normal thing. So noticing that and diffusing, letting those thoughts flow through, and that's a completely normal thing. So that's the sort of acceptance part. Easier said than done, right? But and then what's the commitment part? It's like, well, I definitely feel nervous, or I definitely feel this, I feel scared. What am I actually going to do with my behaviour? That's actually what matters. And so in commitment, we talk about towards moves. My behaviour is going to be something that moves me towards my best life, and my an away move. This is something that moves me away from my best life. And what's your best life? Well, people can. I've found even people with major depressive disorder and multiple comorbidities, you ask them to talk about what their best life would look like. They can easily do that.
Yeah.
That's an accessible thing to do. And it's like, well, what would moving towards that look like? Yeah. And I'll give you an example, actually. I think it most comes alive in a pretty benign example of me being the kids' under 13 football coach.
Yep.
Right. So although I know nothing about football, soccer, I've been a triathlete, for God's sake. A single sport with one person take care of yourself, go all day.
Yeah.
This is a completely different thing. But nonetheless, I was the coach of the primary school team, and what I would notice is we would go to games, and the referees were us, the coaches. You'd split it between half, and presumably I was making these bad calls as well, but they would make bad calls. Yeah. They were often biased, but they were just, regardless, they were going to make mistakes.
Yeah.
And the kids would just lose their shit because they felt it was unfair, which was true. It was unfair. Yeah. It was wrong, which it was. And then when the kids lost it, the parents would lose it. And I think any parent that's been to young people's sports is familiar with what the sort of dynamics that can go on with this. Yeah. It's just actually not that much fun for anyone. And worse than that, then the kids play shit. Who do that? I was like, right, I'm gonna do some acceptance commitment therapy with the kids. And I was like, well, that's going to be a little bit difficult. We're not really doing psychology, but we're heading off to a tournament. It's sort of local. We were St Joseph's Primary playing Takapuna Primary and Forest Hill Primary and Bayswater and Forest Hill. So there's 5 teams.
Yeah.
Got this sort of round robin, and you get to the semis and finals, and win this. And I said to the boys before we left, I was like, oh yeah, I've got this tournament today. Oh yeah. And I was like, what do you reckon's going to happen with the refereeing? And like, oh yeah, it's totally going to suck. I'm like, oh yeah. What do you mean? And it's like, oh well, the ref will do some bad calls against us. I was like, oh yeah. What do you reckon the chances of that are? And they're like, oh, 100%. Like, what, every game? Yep. Multiple times, probably. It's like, okay, what can we do about that? Well, nothing much, but that's going to happen. So that's certain that that's going to happen.
Yeah.
And I was like, how are you going to feel? And a couple of the boys were like, oh, we'll be sweet as. And I was like, will you?
I know better. Yeah.
Not what I've seen.
Yeah.
How are you really going to feel? Oh, yeah, we're going to be pissed off. Not happy. Yeah, these guys, they should know better. Well, yeah, we're not going to be happy. I'm going to feel bad.
Yeah.
And so, and we're like, okay, well, that's pretty normal, isn't it? Like, it's gone against you. They were wrong. Of course you're going to feel that way. So we've now ascertained, boys, that there's a 100% chance in every game, probably multiple times, of calls going against us, and we're going to feel not happy. When they're talking about emotions, they're going to be angry. I'm going to be shaking. And they were talking about this sort of both physical and...
Yeah.
And I was like, this is going quite well. And I was like, oh, yeah. So that's going to be normal. It's certain we're going to be upset, and it's certain it's going to happen. What do you reckon we should do about that? Silence? And then a couple of boys are like, just basically suggested towards moves. Well, it doesn't make any sense to carry on with it because we play shit. We might as well just get on, just notice that and carry on anyway. I'm just like, yes.
Yeah.
And we actually ended up winning that tournament, which was quite cool, not because of the skill of the coach in football matters or even the skill of the boys in football matters, but actually when we had bad calls, we didn't go to pieces and the parents were well behaved.
Yeah.
And every other team lost their shit and played badly, and we won. And I thought that was so cool. I was really proud of that personally, but it's an easy way to illustrate about, all of those concepts, like, you get these negative thoughts and feelings, they're certain, you fuse with them, you act out on the anger, you make away moves, you move away from wanting to be your best football player that day, or you actually diffuse and move away from it. Just one other quick example of that. This might seem like a really subtle way to think about this fusion versus diffusion, but just imagine an emotion like being hungry. Like, you haven't eaten, you're hungry. Like, so you're not avoiding that. You can't delete it. And I'll just say this 3 different ways. Oh, I'm really hungry. I'm so hungry. So me and hunger are fused. We're the same thing. Notice that I'm hungry. So I'm starting to diffuse that a bit. Or sort of pro level. This might sound a bit weird. I'm noticing I'm having a thought about being hungry. And then I'm like, oh, well, that's probably not surprising. You haven't eaten for 12 hours.
Yeah.
But those are very different ways of dealing with the exact same emotion. And you can imagine that one, you're acting out in a sort of hangry way, and you're heading straight for the cafeteria, and you're getting out the credit card and away you go.
Yeah.
Versus actually, I can deal with this.
Mindset, how we frame it, eh?
Yeah. And these are simple things, but part of the problem is in the safetyism and the coddling of the mind is that we shouldn't be experiencing negative emotions, which is rubbish. Yeah, of course,
because it's part of living that good life, like you said.
Yeah, it was going to happen. Yeah. Like you can't not have this.
Yeah.
And I wonder if we avoid that.
Which leads us beautifully into another term that I don't think many people will know or have heard of, because it's not something that we use in everyday language, but it's called anti-fragility, and I've heard of it because of all of my sporting background and all the different things and studies that we've done in there. But talk to us about anti-fragility and how we can use that in our lives.
It's such a great word, great question. Glad you asked that one. There's a couple of biological terms that actually are the proper words for this, but they don't really cut it in normal society. So the real word is hormesis, that a biological system suffers stress, and the response to stress is to adapt yourself to be a more robust version of yourself. And yeah, the easiest way to think about that is just when you get fit. You're not very fit, you go and do some training, you're now worse than when you started. Your body's been broken down, you've got some torn up muscles, and actually, performance is fitness minus fatigue, so you suck.
Yeah.
But, you allow time to recover, then you get better, and you can keep doing that. And so in psychology, then we've talked about resilience, and then the argument is that the word resilience just doesn't cut it. Like, you get distressed and you bounce back to where you were. Oh, big deal. We don't want to do that. We want to be more awesome. And so the word anti-fragile was actually invented by an American economist, Nassim Taleb, and he wrote a book called Anti-Fragile. So we actually need a proper English word to describe one of the most important components in biological humanity. And I guess my argument around this is, and it's not a very palatable one under some conditions, especially for people who are suffering from poor mental health, because it's likely that a large amount of our inability to negotiate ups and downs of life is our lack of robustness, the fact that we're fragile, not anti-fragile. And so when you start to think about health and well-being in that sense, you go, well, how do we become anti-fragile? How do we become a more robust version of ourselves, the best that we can be? And the answer is actually highly well known. These are the sort of essential elements for a good life, which are being fit, eating well, sleeping well, but also exposing yourself to other hard stuff. And this is why I'm such a fan of things like sauna and cold, anything that moves you out of the comfort zone. In fact, I've been saying to my boys just in the last week, I've been randomly running around with this meme going, nothing grows in the comfort zone, boys. And oh my God, that's dead. But maybe that rubs off. But that's the anti-fragile.
Yeah, I love that, and it's just underrated when we talk about our comfort zones, because it's so easy to do that day in, day out, and it's a risk to come out of your comfort zone. Yeah. We're not used to taking those risks. Right through this whole conversation, that's what we've been talking about, right? In different ways is how can you push yourself past that point to put yourself out there in a different way that maybe it'll fail or maybe it'll tip over, but at least you gave it a try and now you've learnt something from it, whether it was don't do it again. I don't know. Yeah.
I think the cold water is such an interesting example because people have such extreme reactions to it either way. So the idea of getting into really cold water to make yourself more awesome and feel good, it seems completely counterintuitive. And you say to some people, they just look at you and go, you're mad. And in fact, I was talking to a doctor friend about that. He goes, I'd rather have poor mental health than have to get into freezing cold water. I was like, really? And then you talk to people who do it and they're like, yeah, it's uncomfortable and it's hard. And my God, you feel good after having done something hard. And no one looks at a cold body of water and goes, this will be fun. Maybe there are, but not in my experience. But going through the stress and the actual distress of doing that, and then the cognitive and bodily adaptations from doing that hard stuff, you're more brown fat, your metabolic rate's up, your brain's in better shape. Man, you feel good. Hard stuff. That's such a closed, easy example of hard stuff. I love it.
So I'm really intrigued. Obviously, I have 3 kids. You guys know I have 3 kids. And we're trying to bring them up the best we can to be robust and be able to manage some of these challenges that are going to come along. So in terms of anti-fragility, in terms of that high psychological stress that is on so many of our kids, what sort of things can we do practically in our everyday lives to give them those challenges, to add that risk, to help them learn some of those things around anti-fragility for themselves, to push them out of their comfort zones? Do you have any suggestions or little things we can do?
Yeah, we've studied this quite a bit actually. So this, I think what actually happens, well, first of all, let's just take a step back to something I talked about earlier, is this device and screens for entertainment. When you think that your average kid's probably doing between 7 and 9 hours of screens for entertainment a day, includes school days in that averaging, what are they not doing now? Because 50 years ago, there were no screens. There were no screens literally for entertainment. There might have been the odd black and white television with a single channel, and you go back another generation, there were literally no screens. What did they do? Well, they went outside and they played. They were bored sometimes. That's a good thing. They were bored. Like, the correct response when your child says, "I'm bored," is awesome.
Yeah,
that's awesome. But we've studied this as this sort of, it sort of falls into, I don't know if people remember this sort of David Attenborough ecological stuff. The home range of the young animal is this. Well, what is the free range of a young human being?
Yeah.
How much do they range from their house on their own terms? And I think there's evidence that that's diminished hugely over the last 50 years. And we've done these studies where we've had grandparents and parents and kids who lived in the same neighbourhood, and you go and talk to them about where they used to go at the same age. Astonishing thing. Miles and miles they would go. And I'll give you an example. When I was a 12-year-old, I had my BMX bike, and I lived in Northcote on Auckland's North Shore. And for some reason, my parents allowed me to collect beer cans. I had a beer can collection, right? And the place to get them is to ride around the neighbourhood to rubbish dumps and golf courses. And these are literally, I would ride all the way to Devonport, I'd ride all the way to Birkdale, I'd ride all the way to Albany by myself. Yeah. I would slip and cut my knee, and I've still got scars from that. And
you're here today.
And I'm here today. Yeah. But so we've tried to think about in our own research over the years this idea of the free range kid, and then that would experience risk intervention on their own terms in the neighbourhood, and the sort of neurocognitive and physical benefits of that, which I think are many. And in many ways, you think it would be easier because you can at least ring up on your phone if you ran into trouble.
Yeah.
But no. And then also just the idea of risky play in general.
Yeah.
And so one of the studies that I'm most proud of doing is we were funded to build more playgrounds in schools just to get kids playing.
Yeah. And
that was an interesting idea. I don't know how we even got funding for that. This is like $1 million off the Health Research Council.
Yeah.
Waste of money, really. It turned out that we couldn't easily do that. The sort of red tape around building adventure playgrounds and safety mats, and there's a few perverse things. Kids thought they sucked anyway.
Yeah.
The cost of a small house, which we didn't have enough money for, and there's some perversity around all of this safety stuff. Is actually there's more injuries than when it's not. When there's more injuries when there's padding on the ground than when there's not. Which doesn't make any sense, but kids manage that risk.
Yeah.
But there are injuries when there's no padding on the ground as well, just to be clear.
Yeah.
And so we were going to give the money back, and I was like, oh God, that seems wrong. So I managed to talk. I tried this in some Decile 10 schools around where I live on the North Shore of Auckland. We're going to abandon. I had this fantasy actually of abandoning all the school rules in the playground. We'd bring back bull rush, and there'd be remember bull rush? Like
I do.
Dangerous game, but interesting. And the boards and trustees of those schools just laughed me out of the place. End up in a couple of schools in West Auckland, and they were like, "Oh yeah, sweet." And principal at one school, Royal Road School, his thing was that this is a school that's up on Auckland's northwestern motorway, and it's actually got a culvert that runs under the motorway. And the principal had been a boy at that school, and his favourite thing from primary school is he used to sneak under the culvert at lunchtime into then apple orchards on the other side and steal apples. And then the guy would chase them. It was friggin' awesome. He was loving it. So this idea of abandoning the school rules really appealed to him.
Yeah.
Another one down in Swanson School in the same area. Wayne McLaughlin became a real champion for this as well. In fact, they had an adventure playground that was falling down and had to be cut down for safety reasons. And then in the end, we didn't even take it away. We just left it in parts, and you could just pick it up and move it around the school.
Yeah.
And we'd jump some old tyres in the school and old ropes. And you think this is going to be bad. We stopped enforcing any rules in the school playground.
Yeah.
They could do bull rush, and they could climb trees. And I thought it was a tremendous social adventure. One bad thing did actually happen. There was a boy broke his arm on the first day of tree climbing at Swanson School. And we were like, oh, God, this is going bad. And the dad came in and he was like, oh, I just want you to know what you're doing is awesome, carry on.
Yeah.
Thank God, but it could have gone the other way. And yeah, what you quickly notice is the kids start to manage risk when it's given to them. And so the bull rush one was so interesting to me. It's like, oh, well, Sam can only tackle Grant but gently because he's younger and stronger, and Des, we just have to put our hands on her hips because
she's a girl.
She's a girl. Well, I don't know what does it want, but the sort of complexity of interactions that they did, and of course the odd kid would get hurt, but really the sort of post-lunch classroom behaviour and learning really improved. Wow. Activity went up, and I think overall injuries and things went down. Yeah. And then I suppose on the social side of that, this is back in the days with TVNZ and these things. We were on those types of programs then. We had a good clip, and one of the ones that we did was watched 5 million times. Wow. So it really resonated with people. Yeah. But at the same time, the parents are watching this and going, "This is cool," but actually, educators and parents taking the risk to actually do that's another whole thing. So I don't think we're succeeded in moving any social advocacy at all. It's gone the other way. And in fact, that's part of the frustration with the work I do. It's like you advocate, you in some cases prove things, you have projects which show really interesting results, gets good coverage. At the same time, society just keeps going the other way. Yeah. I don't know the answer to that. But.
Neither. But when you find it out, could you let us know? Because it's the example for me is my parents live in the same home that I grew up in. Yeah. And I used to leave in the morning on my bike, hoon off, and they wouldn't hear from me again till probably 5 o'clock. I think I had to sometimes call in at lunchtime, depending on who I was hanging out with and what the plan was for the day, just so they knew I was still going. Yeah. But there was time I had to be home. And Mum would be like, oh, we've run out of milk, and we had a dairy on our road. They still have the dairy on their road. Can you go down? And I'd just wander down, grab whatever they needed, come back. And my kids go there now to hang out, and I'll say to Mum, do you let the kids walk down to the dairy shop? I'd never let them do that now, because there's robberies that happen quite frequently at the dairy, and there's, a new community that live around them, and Mum's she just can't.
Yeah, it's interesting that generation that was very permissive is not now.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and so it's all that kind of stuff that I just get really intrigued about, because I would love to do that with my kids, but I'm also I see too many bad things and hear too many bad things.
But is that because of the extra, is there more bad things going on, or is in fact actually it's just our exposure to the negative media? So because my question to you about that sort of roaming around by yourself, one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about, and I'm not sure how you'd measure if it's true or not, but is that the sort of unfettered social interactions at that age that you have to deal with. And I'm not condoning bullying. Yeah. But there's actually quite complex social stuff to deal with when you're a kid, and it can get pretty gnarly out there. Yeah, but I actually think that's quite good. Yeah. What's your feeling about that with what you were?
I was shockingly bullied at primary school. I had big ears, frizzy hair, glasses, buck teeth. Like it was horrible.
Yeah, okay. So we don't want that.
But outside of school, when I was with the people that were my mates, and we'd go riding in the weekends and just laugh and listen to music and just speak about absolute rubbish. We were good kids. We were never seeking mischief, if that makes sense. Like our level of mischief might have been like sneaking onto a work site and writing our names on the wood before the house was finished. So we might be on the plywood. That was my free time. I almost felt safer. Yeah. Like more comfortable hurrying around in the neighbourhood than I probably did at school when I was in primary school. I don't know.
Yeah, I remember getting into, maybe that's a boy thing, but into physical confrontations.
Oh yeah, no.
Which actually did serve a purpose. Yeah. Like no one actually got hurt. Yeah. But things got sorted out, and you had to deal with some of that. And I thought there's value in some of that. Whereas your mum's coming along and just that never happens. Yeah. I'm not saying you're trying to prepare yourself for adulthood that you do that.
Yeah.
But an unstable, uncertain world that you have to negotiate is quite a interesting thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even like the bikes in our day were absolute pieces of crap.
None of this electric.
They're not safe in today's terms.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. One of my friends got a really bad injury. I won't say exactly what she did this day because it was so bad, but she got a really bad injury. She was on her brother's bike that was seen how boy bikes and girl bikes at the bar in different places. And we were at our old primary school. We were riding up these stairs, which you shouldn't have done. We were coming off a big hill and then riding up, but she lost her footing and she came down on the bar. But I just remember thinking, like, how do we get allowed to even do this? And we had to walk her home because she couldn't get back on the bike. And so we walked for probably a good 6, 7, 8 Ks home. And then, it's all those kind of things we didn't have. And her bike had like twink on it. Her brother had painted it like it was this rundown thing. The chain didn't work. It was.
Tyres were always going down.
Yeah, if they were ever up.
Yeah.
But it was just all those kinds of things. Whereas, my kids don't ever experience that kind of thing. So it's how it's a work on. It's a work on for all of us. But I think it does need to be some type of. We need to start building that back into our social norm rather than it being like how you said with us with devices in a family, we're quite weird to people.
Yeah.
Like, how do we start making that normal, rather than the other way
Yeah, it's
around?
different world, isn't it? I clearly remember when I was about 6 or 7 years old, it was one of my first clear memories, is our Holden wouldn't start. And Dad's like, oh, shit, we need someone, we're going to push start it. Yeah. Grant, you hop in the driver's seat, and what I want you to do is I'm going to push it and you just drop this bit out and, hopefully it'll start. I mean, oh my God, really?
My kids will be in heaven now if they got that opportunity. That's so cool. So how can we foster a love of reading with our kids? How can we start to really build that into their worlds and show them the benefits of reading and learning and
Yeah, that's so interesting because at the same time we talk about those data with the 8 and 9 hours of screen time, reading for pleasure has plummeted to almost zero. I mean, this includes reading online, blogs and everything, but let alone actual books in our young people. And I feel really strongly that, almost all of the benefits of reading are not so much in learning, but being able to be creative and get an imagination and immerse yourself in another whole world that you've completely created. Not that they've created on a screen for you. Yeah. That you're in, and the feeling of going, I can't wait to get back to that book. And I know there's a percentage of kids, and I know it's about 10%. It might be 20 in some communities that still do that. Yeah. And my God, this is the best thing. I've always thought of myself as being reasonably smart. And the only thing I attribute that to that is a childhood love of reading, which I still maintain today. Yeah. And it's another huge reason to not allow devices, because it'll displace that. It's a more fun, immediately satisfying activity than going through reading. And actually, how do your kids go with reading?
They love it.
Because they're not on the devices, they're reading.
My 10-year-old chomps at the bit to get home to finish Gangster Granny or whatever book is currently on he just read my Nelson Mandela book about the Long Walk of Freedom.
At what age?
10.
That's friggin' awesome.
Yeah, it's not a fast read, I just read Greta Thunberg, and he's just picked her book up to read, and so he just loves it. He's just absorbing that's his joy, and then he'll use it in his imaginative play with his brother and sister, and it sort of trickles down, and it's really cool. So I did not have that love of reading. I've only found that as a 35, 34 plus year old, not when I was a kid. It was the biggest chore. I hated reading.
Oh, did you?
Hated reading. Yeah. Put me outside on my bike, give me netball, give me athletics, give me whatever. Books, no.
I mean, I used to read under my covers with a torch when I was supposed to have gone to sleep. Yeah. Which I don't think was good for me, but it's it's an interesting thing. And they'd catch me, put your light out, stop reading, we told you. Yeah. But gosh, it's, I think this is another, devices and screen entertainment. I don't know what good particularly comes of that, because it displaces being active, it displaces being outside, it displaces reading, it displaces risk and adventure. It displaces your ability to become a robust human being. Is there any good that comes of that?
Just that connection, I think we don't rate it. Yeah, I think there's that connection point in there where, like, so my 80-year-old dad, I got him on Facebook.
Yes.
Shot Stanley. He trusted me enough to get on Facebook. And he found friends from his primary school.
Yeah, that's cool.
And so he talks to his mate Ron and stuff.
That's the thing.
And that's been so neat for him.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's about sort of seeing that sunshine or that good. And like sometimes I have friends who we share memes back and forth. Yeah. So we may not have seen each other for a few months, but just you see something and it makes you think of them. So there's goods, but there's lots of bads. And it's just sort of how we
and some parts of parenting we identify that. Like, so, this idea of a sleepover.
Yeah.
When they're 10, it's all good and well. When they're 15, nothing good happens after 10 o'clock at night. Like, nothing. You do not have sleepovers for 15-year-olds. Like especially boys, they're going to get up to bad shit. Like, it's not a thing. Nothing good happens there. And actually, after a couple of hours on a device, nothing good happens either. Nothing grows there.
Yeah.
And I think, I'd be so interested to see, this is part of the problem with curiosity, is you really wonder what the world will look like in 50 years, and you'll maybe not get to see it.
Yeah.
And I wonder what we will look at that and go, shit, what were we thinking?
Yeah.
Because there's things like smoking and, slavery. We look at it, oh, that was weird, awkward. Even now we're getting there with sugar, I suppose. You're not going to start to bring out the full strength Cokes and start to feed them to your kids. Like, what the hell? So where are we going to be with this when we've come to terms with this technology?
I know I have to move on for this, so I'm going to make one more thing. So good things do happen after 10 o'clock sleepovers when you're 15. We used to have the old tape deck where you could record your own voice. So you'd push play and record and you could talk.
Oh, yeah.
And we used to make radio, so we'd be like, next up on whatever radio station, we'd call ourselves until 2 o'clock in the morning. We'd be, my mum and dad, we'd sleep in the garage at my mum and dad's place. Yeah. God, we laughed. Those are some of my...
Have you still got any of those tapes?
No.
Oh my God, imagine if you did.
I don't know where they've landed, which makes me so sad, because we'd make up songs and God, it was funny. There was some of my funnest memories was in the garage when we should have been asleep, lights were off, and mum and dad would come and obviously check on the garage door to make sure everyone was asleep, and we'd be like, they're going, quiet, and then back again. You're back with Daz and ran on da 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 da. Yeah, it was so funny.
Oh, look what that's led to.
Yeah. Look at me now. That was more my training. So with all the current financial stresses that are across, right, not just New Zealand, but we're going to obviously focus on New Zealand today, and we're talking about making those good choices with our energy drinks. And I like the point that you made. If we've got to check the label, that's the issue we've got actually with our food. We've got to start looking at that stuff too. But with our financial stresses and feeding our families and sort of trying to make good on our dollar to stretch it as far as we can, what can families do? Do you have some tips around food that families can do under this kind of financial stress that people are under at the moment? How do we make better choices with our food?
Yeah, well, there's sort of there's countering problems here, right? So at the one hand, we talk about one easy way to talk about food that I think avoids arguments. I've been in some food arguments, trust me. Like I'd got into nutrition thinking, we'll talk about the science and we'll have a robust discussion, because that's what we do in exercise science, and that's what we do in sleep and psychology and connection. We just debate these things and we come to a conclusion. No, not the case in diet. Everyone's got an opinion. You've got overlaying religious views. You've got vegans. You've got carnivores. You've got low carb keto. You've got God knows what. It's tribal and it's feral. But what's interesting to me is everyone agrees that we eat far too much of a category called ultra-processed food, and we eat far too little of whole food. So on one end you've got food that was recently alive in nature, running around, flying, swimming, growing somewhere. It was recognisably so. Yeah. At the other end you've got stuff that was clearly not recently alive and is not recognisable where it came from. That's Dorito is a good example of that. Yeah. So you go, well, are we eating a lot of ultra-processed food? And you can do your own audits on that. You can go and look at your own pantries and kitchens. You can You can self-audit other people in the supermarket. You do this, you sort of sidle up alongside them.
No, I've made that one of my goals, never to judge someone else.
No, not judging. It's just sort of checking out the contents. I'm curious about that, like people do that. And it's just going, well, what's happening? And then you can audit the whole supermarket. And you do that, and it's about 70% of the products in the supermarket are ultra-processed, not clearly recently alive. And then you go, well, what do people eat? We've looked at kids' lunches are a good example at schools. They tend to be more like 80%. Probably overall we're sitting at about 60% of what we put in our mouths is ultra-processed. So could you move away from that? Well, the answer is that's actually really hard because the cheapest food is the most ultra-processed food. And you start to get into things that I widely regard as health food, which are meat, eggs, fish, all animal products, all fresh fruits and veg. Those tend to be the more expensive things at the supermarket. If you've had a history with your kids of not feeding them their stuff, then good luck.
Hard to bring it back.
That's a thing. I mean, I don't have an answer to that. I think we undereat protein by a vast amount. We could do much better. That's the most expensive nutrient to buy. We have ended up in a situation where you could easily, and farmers and local rural communities are very good at this, right? They'll just get their own home kills and cut them up and spread them out, and meat's cheap. But here we can't do that because the law doesn't allow that. It's got to go through this, that, and the other industrial process before you can actually get it. If you want to get a home kill, you're actually breaking the law, which we do. And like the way that we can get food fresh from a farm, our big supermarkets, the duopoly of that pays and screws down our farmers and our primary producers, and then sells for a high margin. Fresh fruit and veg are the highest margin thing in the supermarket. That local, the legislation and ability to allow that happen is like a missing obvious piece in our society, that you can access local food that's cheap. And the farmers and the primary producers will make more money off that. So that's the actual solution. But until we get to that, I don't have an easy answer. Healthy food, I'd say, dietitians and public health people argue all the time, well, you can feed people healthy and you do this and that. It's true, the skill and effort needed to do that is high. So you can home make your meals, and you can get seasonal fruit and veg that are cheaper, and you can get cheaper cuts of meat and source them elsewhere. But you are going to need time to do that.
Which is the next...
So I don't think I have a very good answer to you, frankly.
It's important conversations to keep having, because, if we don't even hear about why our meat is expensive and why veggies are expensive, then we keep sort of just being frustrated. But if we can hear those whys, maybe we can start advocating in different places to start trying to help change happen and bring awareness to it. I think that's all really, really important.
Well, I mean, a good example of this is you go and look at New Zealand, top 100 rich list. You look at the number of pack and save owners that are on that. That's the bulk of the people.
Haven't looked at it. Man, you're not wrong. Yeah. One step at a time, but that needs to be a drastic change for New Zealand. It's just not sustainable for anybody.
No. And there has been a step change in gardening and things. We used to do that. My parents had a garden. I don't know if yours did.
Yep, they did.
And
get our potatoes.
But I can't imagine doing that now. I just can't.
Yep. Even my nana, we had a little granny flat at the back of our house, and she had a veggie patch at the back of her. She had her radishes and her rhubarb and all her bits and bobs.
Radishes and rhubarb. Oh, you've got to love it.
Yep, she loved her rhubarb, old nana. So, who is a person who has really positively impacted you throughout your life, and why?
This is going to sound quite cheesy, but I mean it. My wife Louise is an amazing woman. Like, she's less averse to risk than I am, and so she's got on in this area of public health, like all of the books that we wrote, the What the Fat.
Yeah.
That she made that happen. Wow. The author, and Karen's the author on that, but she made those happen.
Yeah.
The businesses that we've started in health, Vitality Works, and now what we do with PreKure, we were going, actually, it's good enough talking about health. We actually need to do more about health. So this sort of business for good. She's, I mean, honestly, like, I was doing kettlebell swings yesterday for some random reason, and it's not my back, but it's like one side.
Yeah.
I don't know, something went, I couldn't sleep, and I was reading, and she's like, "Oh, I'll get you some Nurofen and Panadol." I'm just like, who does that?
Yeah.
It's just friggin' awesome. So yeah, you can't go past that. You can say the random hero, but actually, like, she's the hero.
Yeah.
So
day to day.
Yeah. But also just maybe I'd just be curious and never actually achieve anything.
Yeah.
She actually achieves stuff.
Yeah.
So it's probably a good combination.
Yeah, and helps you turn those curiosities into pathways for you as well.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Now we've got one final thing we do at the end of interviews. So each interviewee writes a question for the next interviewee.
Okay.
So here is your one for today. So what was the last thing that made you cry?
Well, I just had a tear coming right now talking about my wife.
Yeah.
So that I was like, I'm actually going to cry shortly. But it's not from being upset.
Yeah.
It's from pleasure. So I guess that's it. So so right now, just talking about
Oh, I love that.
that thing. So that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes when we say things out loud about people that we love, like we've always known we love it. When you verbalise it, I think it just hits.
Yeah, it's emotional.
Strings a different way. Eh?
Yeah. If it's about being upset, what did surprise me is my dad died at the end of last year from a long thing with cancer. There's a lot of frustration and things going on with him, and I didn't cry. I was sad that he died, and I just didn't cry. And I was like, am there something wrong with me, or is it? But it's like, no, Dad needed to go, and let's celebrate his life. And I thought, that would be a thing where you cried.
Yeah.
I would cry. I'll tell you which will break my heart soon, is we've had border collies, dogs, our whole life, and my current dog Bluey is 13 and a half. And he's getting towards his end of his life. Yeah. And I just actually think about that. Like, I know that's going to completely break my heart, but it's like they've lived a whole life and you've got to celebrate it.
Yeah.
God, that's the problem with dogs living a short life and us being longer.
We lost our dog last year. He was almost 15.
Oh, you got to 15. Wow. What sort was it?
Miniature schnauzer.
Yeah.
But I was, as my team will tell you, I was devastated because he was there before we got married. He was there at our wedding. He was there for the birth of our three, not at the place of having babies, but he had been this the little thread that had run through it all.
Yeah. At the same time, he's lived like longer than any dog usually does, and had a full life and everything. But
I understand. Well, thank you so much for today. There is so much for people to learn about and take away, both for themselves, but if they've got children, if we've got teachers listening, about risk and what we can do at school to start, shifting the dial in terms of giving them opportunities to just free range and be out there and do things and figure it out for themselves. But thank you so much, Grant. This has been absolutely amazing. So thank you for listening, and we will see you again soon. Ka kite.